Hi guys, happy Monday if you're choosing to do this on Monday. This is a video about how to craft a thesis for a rhetorical analysis essay. Okay, so obviously this is the essay you're going to be writing in the AP test, so that's why we're focusing so much on it. And so what I'm actually looking at off on the screen over here is I have also included in Schoology, I guess is how you're supposed to say it, just kind of guided notes. It's nothing you need to fill in or turn in or anything. It's just going to be really helpful. Like if you can put up on your screen, this is what I do a lot, my video on the right side or my video on your phone or something, and then these notes on the left side, it'll be really helpful. I'm sure I could have done that, but this is quicker for me to do. So I would, if I were you, go along with those notes. Otherwise, this video is going to be kind of confusing if you're just listening to me talk. So that's how I suggest you do it, because I'm looking at these notes right now and that's kind of guiding what I'm going to be talking about. Okay. One thing I want to say is that we have worked with Thesis a lot in class, and so you guys probably have a pretty good head start on it. That's one thing we kind of start with. It's a thesis. It's the main thing, right? But there was something that we didn't get to in class that I do want to talk about, just your options that you have with a rhetorical analysis thesis, okay? And so if you're hopefully following along, I gave you time to get to this file. And if you want to print out the file and take your own notes about what I'm saying, maybe that helps you. You could do that too, but like I said, this is just adding. Also, when you're taking the test, you guys can have any notes you want in front of you. We'll talk about that as it gets closer, but I wouldn't suggest you have like your whole binder, because that can get overwhelming and you'll maybe run out of time. But if you really find these notes helpful, you could have them, okay? So follow along or write notes if you want on the margins. Okay, so there are two options of which type of thesis you can use. And I'm not going to say one's good or one's bad or anything like that. We're going to go over kind of the pros and cons of both. And so both of these, remember the point of a rhetorical analysis, so the point of a thesis is you want to explain how the speaker gets across his or her purpose to the audience, right? How are they doing that? And so the first one we're going to start with is on the left side. You need to know what devices are. Okay, and so when we talk about devices, we're analyzing and we're talking about devices that the author uses. These are specific parts of text that you can point out. These are what the writer uses. They're usually nouns. Okay, so I give you a whole list of examples there. We've worked with all of these. Hopefully these look familiar. And these are just a few, right? We could go off on a tangent. There's hundreds you could choose from. But repetition or imagery or alliteration or metaphors or syntax or diction, those are all devices. Those are specific devices that you can say they use this. And usually it's a noun. Okay, so a metaphor, imagery, right? Things like that. Okay, or there's the strategy. And when you think of strategy, you go kind of broader, okay? And so this is not so much what the writer uses, that's devices, but more what the writer does, okay? And so ideas communicated, appeals are actually strategies. So ethos, logos, pathos. The tone, right? The tone isn't really a device, it's more a strategy. Structure, so how they structure it. Organization, details, comparison, contrast. If you go back to the beginning, very beginning of AP, we talked about those different rhetorical modes you could write in, right? And so comparison, contrast was one of them. Description, things like that. Those are all strategies, okay? The little pictures I put under, if you're looking at the notes, devices you think of more as specific tools, right? Like a drill, a hammer, you can name them. There specifically is the drill. There specifically is the imagery. I can show you evidence of that. Whereas strategy is more like the house, building the entire house, or the blueprints or the structure, right? Okay, we're going to put the foundation down first, and then we're going to do this. It's more of an overall strategy, okay? If that example didn't do it for you, then I'm sorry, but hopefully you can kind of see the difference, okay? One thing I didn't say is the strategy is like more a verb, okay? And so what they're doing, what the writer does, not so much what he specifically uses, okay? Well, there's a relationship between these two, and we'll talk about that in a second. Okay, so then if you scroll down to the next page, we have these two types of thesis statements then. You could either have a device-driven thesis statement, which is fine, or you can have an idea-driven thesis statement. So we'll kind of, through this table, go over the positives and negatives of both. We're going to start with the device-driven thesis, okay? And so this is a sentence that includes the rhetorical devices that you will explore in your essay, what the writer uses, okay? So when I look at the example, you can see the three devices. They slap you in the face. You can see them perfectly, right? She strengthens the power of her speech through parallel structure, repetition of important values, and through personal experiences. Boop, 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 three devices, okay? Specific things that I'm saying she uses to get her point across. They're using the 2019 question too. So if you remember, this is the one you wrote about in your portfolio. So if it kind of reminds you of something, that's what it is. Okay, so the pros and cons for this thesis is it's a clear direction for you and the reader. You know where you're going. You can already kind of see your 3 paragraphs, what they're going to be, right? It's arguable, so you'd get your 1 point for thesis, and it does include rhetorical choices, so that'd be fine. The cons is it does tend to be more focused on the devices and less on the rhetoric or how the writer's writing. And so you might be looking at that and thinking, what? That's a great thesis. That's how I've written all my thesis. Totally fine. When I show you the example of the other one, you'll see what I mean a little bit, that this thesis is a tiny bit more focused on just like, yeah, here's the evidence devices she uses, and it kind of lacks a little bit of the rhetoric and the choices and like the overall structure of the essay, and focuses more on the little stuff. So the formula for this thesis, so this is something I would suggest that even if you don't take this entire note page, you copy down this formula and have it in front of you when you're writing your essay for AP, because it can just be really helpful to just fill in the blanks if you're stuck. Okay, and so hopefully you can see as I give you the formula, you can totally see that in that example thesis. So you have the writer, we have Albright, plus a strong verb, strengthens. Notice she doesn't just say uses, right? It's good to throw a better verb in there than just uses all the time. So Albright strengthens the power of her speech through, so we have that word, you're just gonna add through in there, through the 3 devices that she chose. And so she says important values, personal experiences, and then the purpose and the message comes last. With empowered women to persuade, there's our purpose, to persuade them to persevere. The message is persevere, women. Okay, so there's your formula for the thesis. I'm gonna go down to the 3rd page at the end and talk about the whole scope of the essay. So we're gonna go back, stay on this page. Now we're gonna go over to the idea-driven thesis. Remember, ideas are more what the writer does, what you see them doing, not necessarily the specifics of what they're using. The reason this thesis turns out to probably be a little bit better is you'll see that this thesis actually still does include devices in it, in the essay, just not in the thesis. So you'll see, I'm getting ahead of myself. So our explanation is this thesis is a sentence that includes the ideas or strategies you will explore in your essay. It states what the writer does in the passage. What strategies do they use, not just what little pieces of evidence or devices. Okay? Both fine, but you'll see why this one's different. Okay? And then I actually here gotta give you 2 examples. Okay? And so we'll just look at the first one first, right? She says, by inspiring graduates to live courageously and then urging them to challenge adversity, Albright motivates the young woman to break the glass ceiling and achieve equality. Okay, so maybe right now you're looking and you're like, that's a bad thesis. They didn't even talk about rhetorical devices. They didn't even talk about diction or any of the things we've been learning all year, right? You're right, they didn't in their thesis yet, and that's actually fine. But what do they say? They are making claims. They're saying she's inspiring. She's urging them to challenge adversity. She is, yeah, those are basically the 2 strategies they say she uses. okay? And then it still does have that purpose and that message, right? She's motivating and telling them, break the glass ceiling, okay? And then this second one is just another way to say it. And so you'll see when we get down to the formula for this, she's kind of saying the same thing, but just in a different way. So Albright contrasts approaches to life, relays inspiring stories, and urges graduates to aim high in order to convey her audience that the noble path of life is one of challenges, so they will persevere. Okay, so just a different way to say it. The pros of this essay is it's really good if you're kind of making multiple claims, and it is more of a rhetoric-driven essay. What I mean by that is you're talking more about the author's purpose and like what they're trying to get across, and less about what they're using right off the bat. What they're using is you'll see, be more of your evidence. And so more pros. The con here is this is often tough to construct with a time limit. Okay, you guys have 40 minutes to do this. I get that. We could write amazing, I have no doubt you guys are amazing. We could write an amazing thesis like this, but in 40 minutes, let's be realistic. So if you're already reading this and you're like, that is up here and I'm still here, Mrs. Vandria, that's fine, okay? But I just want to show you both options. So the formula for this thesis is by, you're going to add 2 strategies, so the broader things, right? Inspiring and, I don't even remember what her other one was, and urging them to challenge adversity, okay? And so notice those aren't devices, those aren't specific, those are broad things she's doing. Plus the writer, so by doing those 2 things, Albright conveys, there's our strong verb, or in the first one, urges them, I think is our verb, yeah, to do what? What's the message? And she says the message is to break the glass ceiling. The second one, I give you another formula if you like that one better. Albright includes blank strategies in order to get this message across, okay? So you'll have to look back and forth and see where the differences are. I'll let you do that on your own time to make sure that you understand those 2 formulas for your thesis, okay? So this is the last thing I want to show you is this is kind of why the idea-driven essay is looked at as a little bit better, but also do the device-driven essay if you want. And so the device-driven essay, you can notice how it's laid out is exactly how you would expect it to be laid out. They gave you their thesis. They said, here's the 3 things she uses. And here's my 3 paragraphs telling the 3 things she uses, right? Body 1, parallel structure. Here's an example I'm going to use. Body 2, repetition of values. Here's an example I'm going to use. Body 3, empowered women. Here's an example of her talking about empowered women, right? And so I also wrote in their commentary, there's a few different ways you could include commentary in there. Don't forget your commentary. And so that one's just kind of what you think of when you think of a 5-paragraph essay, right? Okay, here's my topic sentence, here's my evidence, here's to back it up, okay? Whereas the idea-driven essay then is different in this way, right? And so notice in the idea-driven essay, maybe you're kind of freaked out because you're like, they haven't talked about devices yet, and we're supposed to use devices. I think we've been learning about that all year in AP, right? They use the devices as their evidence, and so it kind of gets a little bit more layered, like an onion, than the other one's a little bit more straightforward. So in the idea-driven essay, they said one of her strategies was to inspire the youth to live courageously. And so then their evidence for that in that body 1 paragraph is going to be that they use hopeful diction in order to inspire, and they use a call to action in the opening and the closing. Okay? And so notice the shift there. When we use the strategy idea-driven essay, now we're still using devices, but the devices become more of our evidence and our ways to back up the strategy and not just the primary thing we're arguing. Okay? For example, body 2, she says that this Albright is urging them to challenge adversity. And so 2 ways she does that is by using examples of powerful women and by the repetition of the word persevere. Okay? So if we were going to turn that second essay, that idea-driven essay, into a device-driven essay, it would kind of flip, and that our body 1 would say, she uses hopeful diction. Our body 2 would say, she uses repetition of the word persevere, right? And so you still can use kind of the same ideas, it's just how you're laying it out. And so if I went through this and one of those seems to make more sense to you and you're like, oh, device-driven essay, I don't care if it's the 5-paragraph essay, that's what I'm gonna do, great. But if that idea-driven essay made sense to you and you're like, I see kind of the differences, then I wanted to give you the opportunity to see that there are multiple options, okay? Once again, both good. Use either one. Okay, so now hopefully you are taking off to write your thesis about the 2016 question 2. Hopefully you can use these formulas, do it if you're stuck, to help you out. Okay? See you guys when I see ya. Later.